Paddock.
A little later in the program, we're going to be evaluating treasures that you viewers have brought in for us to examine. Right now, we're going to be looking at an exquisite collection of Roseville pottery, production pieces made in the early through the mid part of this century. But be aware that there are tons and tons of reproductions on the market today. By the end of the segment, I hope that you will be able to determine what's old and what's not.
Tonight, Helene and I are surrounded with a wonderful collection of Roseville art pottery. Today's collectors are endlessly fascinated with the tremendous variety of this pottery. It's sought after across the country, and prices are reportedly going up very rapidly. Roseville was founded in Roseville, Ohio in 1890. They eventually had plants in both Roseville and in Zanesville, Ohio, and they moved to Zanesville entirely in the late 19th century. In the beginning, they made some very interesting household wares rather than art wares.
This is a utilitarian yellowware pottery. You can see the yellow clay on the inside. This pottery, by the way, Joe, this type of pottery was made not just in Roseville, but also I have from my grandmother a blue and white spongeware pitcher, a yellowware pitcher. This form, straight side, applied handle, over and over again was made and used and reused. Also with the floral motif as decoration. This one is a little bit before 1920s, probably early part of the 20th century. Let's talk about value for utilitarian wares. It's not as high because it's not as desirable to collectors as some of the more decorative pieces. This pitcher ranges between $150 and $200.
I think we really need to strongly point out that Ohio wares often have a yellow body, and it's very well shown by the inside portion of that piece. Early on, the company made very art-intensive things. One decorator might spend an entire day making just one piece. Then as the 20th century came on and progressed, the company stopped doing that, and they started focusing on molded wares that didn't require so much artistic attention. And that decorator who had been making one piece earlier in a day was now required to make as many as 300 pieces in a day. Early on, many wonderful things were made, like this tankard pitcher, fraternal tankard. It was made before 1916, and its value is about $275. Interestingly, it usually came with a set of tankard mugs that are also in the $200 range for each one. About 1915, the company started making lines like this wonderful Donatello piece. This piece became incredibly popular. They just sold the heck out of this line.
Now, I want to talk about, on both of these two pieces, the crackle ware, or the crackled lines on the interior. There's also a crack almost all the way through on this particular pot. And that affects the value of them. Collectors want the best pieces. They look for condition, and the value on this one is lessened because of that crazing or cracking inside.
This happens because the glaze, the body of the pot when it was in the kiln shrank more than the glaze did, and so the glaze cracked. It said not to fit. In other words, the glaze doesn't fit and it crackles. The wares that most collectors are interested in are the molded wares, and such as these back here. Certainly one of the most popular lines that Roseville made is pine cone.
Now, the brown color is the most common in the pine cone, and you can see on the handles the very well-defined pine cone motif, flared vase on a circular base. and really quite a beautiful piece. But brown is just not desirable today. The blue greens, and by the way, this vase runs in the $450 to $550 range because of the size, and it's about 1930s.
Still a pretty good price.
Still, that's a little bit astounding, I think. You know, if brown is not popular, why is it, you know, $1,000?
Because Roseville is so popular in general.
Exactly. Now, the blue greens, one with a little bit more molded decoration and one with a little less molded pine cone decoration on it. And both of these, again, are early part of the 20th century, and they run in the anywhere from $200 to $250 range. Now, if we had a blue, and blue is really, really rare, it would be pretty much close to double that price. And if we had a pink, zowie, because pink is like, in pine cone, is the top of the line, and that would absolutely be double and approach the price of the brown.
And exceed it by much. Pink is really a collector's dream. Roseville made all kinds of wonderful naturalistic patterns. We have patterns like clematis.
I like the flower basket form of that, and flower baskets were very, very popular with Roseville.
And highly collectible by today's collectors.
Doesn't that have the Roseville mark on it? Let's show
Yes.
that, because I want people to be able to see it and know what the real Roseville mark looks like, and explain it. And it says Roseville, USA, and then it has numbers.
This is the typical Roseville mark that you will find on pieces from the 40s and the 50s. When most of this kind of molded ware was made. Now, typically, this isn't considered by most purists as being art pottery. It's called industrial art ware because it was produced in a mass-produced fashion. This vase is another basket. The pattern is Zephyr Lily. Very, very modern shape.
You know how I like blues.
Yes, and that's a beautiful color.
It is a beautiful, beautiful color. And I know of collectors that don't just put these up on shelves, they use them.
Of course. This one is worth about $200. And this one, again, is also worth about $200.
Now, I wonder why this one, the blue, is a better color than the brown. Why are they the same price?
Well,
do we have an answer for that even?
Well, certainly.
No, you have the answer. I'm talking about John Q. Public. Do they have the answer?
They will in a minute.
Okay.
It has to do a great deal with the pattern on the outside. Certain flower patterns are more valuable than others. Now, clematis is a pattern that is coming. It's a pattern that was a little soft, and now collectors are becoming more and more interested in it. So it has to do with the design as well as the shape and the color. For instance, this wonderful Frisia wall pocket. Collectors are very interested in wall pockets right now.
And they were not. A number of years ago, you could buy them for $5 and $10.
Yes.
And today?
$200 for this one.
And they usually came in pairs.
Yes.
And pairs are very important in certain types of antiques, like
bookends
and candle holders.
Yes, you certainly don't want to buy bookends or candle holders in anything other than pairs. Collectors must insist on this. Now, finding a pair of bookends in Roseville is very hard because so many of them were broken. Books tumbled off the shelf, and with them the bookend followed. This pair is $450 for the pair. Now,
the candle holders, Zephyr Lily pattern, run in the $50, $75 range. And these are really quite beautiful.
And they're less expensive because more of them survived.
And what I would love to talk about now are pieces of real Roseville and some surprises.
What we're looking at now is a pink foxglove console bowl that's worth about $350.
The unusual color and size of that are really interesting. And wouldn't, Joe, that have really had candlesticks to go with it? Console bowl, probably?
Yes. Originally, it would have had a pair of candlesticks that went with it. And I guess we should point out that this is an original piece of Roseville foxglove.
I think we ought to look now at the cornucopia vase and the other little blue-green vase, both again in the same pattern.
These are both originals. They're both smaller pieces and less expensive, but they are originals. The next piece, however...
And those, the value on those runs?
About $100 a quarter.
Okay, for both of them.
But they're smaller and they're less interesting than the big console bowl.
Okay. Now, you're going to ask me on the next piece what I think of it?
Sure. What do you think of this next piece?
Now, we always save the best for last, or we try to.
Or the worst for last in this case.
Uh-oh, Joe.
Let's make it perfectly clear that this, what they're looking at now, is a fake.
An absolute, unadulterated, the color. And a lot of common sense here, because color is totally wrong. And if you look at all of the other pieces that we've been seeing in Roseville pottery, and we look at the color of this piece, it's just yucky poo.
Is that a technical term?
Absolutely technical term. There's also a difference in the molding of the flowers.
Yes.
And that's where you have to not just go to museums, you've got to be able to touch and to feel those pieces and know what's right and what isn't. And then you turn it over and you look at the marking. And the marking is fainter as opposed to the real piece of Roseville pottery that we looked at.
Notice the signature on the right is much clearer, much better defined, is much better raised, whereas the signature on the fake on the left is much more indistinct. There's also a difference in the V's, with the fake having a narrower V.
Are there other factors, Joe, to make our viewers aware of?
Well, that poisonous look, I think, is the one thing that they should know. It's unlike any coloration that you're going to find in Roseville period paragraph. Now, we've seen a lot of interesting things today, and I want everyone to realize that there is reproduction Roseville out there, and be careful before you buy. The variety is wonderful, but know what the old looks like before you invest. Now, let's take a look at some of the items our viewers have brought us from their attics. Roxanne, tell me about your doll.
Okay, this doll is made of paper mache. The head is, the legs and arms are made of wood. The body is made of kid metal.
Okay. It's really a very beautiful piece. And incidentally, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. And this is called a milliner's model. And she should have a shoulder head, which means that the head fits on down on her, is shaped like her shoulders. You can see it right here. It's attached like this. Yeah. Then underneath, she has what collectors call a kid body, which means basically kid leather. I always feel so strange when I'm doing this, but we have the kid leather stitched in here, and we have the wooden extremities, as you pointed out. Now, it's very important that she have an original costume on, and she does.
Yeah.
And that really helps the value of this doll. She's called a milliner's model, the paper mache head, and she dates somewhere between, these were made between about 1820 and about 1860. This one probably dates mid-range, say circa 1850 or so, which means could have been made as early as 1840. She's a beautiful doll. She's in wonderful condition. She's European, and she should be valued in the neighborhood of $850 to $950.
I understand that you just inherited this today.
3 hours ago, matter of fact.
What's the family history of it?
This was a gift to my great-grandmother on her wedding day. She was lived in Pennsylvania, and this was given to her as a wedding present.
Did they ever say anything about the artist to you?
Never. I never knew anything.
Well, the artist is basically well known in the New York art circle. The gentleman was one of the originators of the Peggy Girl and the Peggy Head. He also did a lot with Saturday Evening Post. And to have gotten this as a wedding present is an extremely nice gift. Is there anyone in the family that happened to have the name Peggy?
Just my mother.
Oh, I wonder if someone simply was really very special to the artist. It may have been as a gift through that. The painting has a realistic value in the range of $1,500 to $2,500. It's an original piece. You've got a charcoal here and some graphite. It's well preserved and in the original frame. Are you planning on giving it a place of honor in the house?
Now I am, absolutely. Oh, it's just beautiful. I just love it for its beauty. I always have.
Bridget, tell me about the candlestick.
Well, it's not mine. It's owned by a neighbor of mine who's been a dealer and a collector with lovely, lovely things for 40 or 50 years. I don't think she has any great hopes of this having any intrinsic value, but she doesn't know anything of the provenance. She's curious about where it might have been. It was delivered to her by a relative about 40 or 50 years ago.
Okay. My first question is, where's the second one?
Well,
Usually candlesticks came in pairs, and that immediately lessens the value when you only have one. And I would caution you, if you collect candlesticks, don't buy one unless you absolutely love it.
Have to have it.
Yeah, exactly. Buy two. Removable Bobèche on the top. No wear, no patina, no age. I immediately put on glasses and inspect. And your eyes are probably one of your best sources. Your common sense. There's absolutely no age anywhere on this stick. It probably is not older than 40. Than the gift. Exactly. Attractive, good condition, but again, it's a single. Now, I have a friend that collects single candlesticks. What are they worth? $75. Decorative value, maybe 50. But there's not a lot of pitting, so it's okay. I'm glad that she didn't have high expectations. I think that she should treasure it as a gift.
I think that's its main value to her, and the curiosity.
Hi, what can you tell me about your beautiful vase?
That was given to my mother, according to what she told me, in 1927. At the time she was 10 years old. She said that a military man, she didn't know his rank or anything, brought it when he was in Southeast Asia. So it predates Second World War, of course, I'm sure.
Well, what I find interesting is the note on the bottom. Your mother washed this and some of the color came off. And I think that's a very good point, that people ought to be very careful how they clean their antiques, because in many cases they can do a great deal of damage by washing them or polishing them or being a little bit too exuberant when it comes to cleaning their things. This is Japanese. It is a type of ware called totai, which indicates a cloisonne on a ceramic body. In this case, it's porcelain. If you'll see in here where all the leaves are, they first applied wires, and then they filled it in with enamels. So this is an enameling process inside wires, and these dark, somber colors are very typical of this type of ware. This type of work was first done about 1860. I'd say this piece is probably 1885 or so, perhaps a bit later. Because of the cleaning, it's going to be devalued a little bit because we were losing some of the color values in here. But still, at retail, it should be valued between $300 and $350. But it's a lovely piece. I particularly like the bird on the back, which is very typical of work of this area, of this era. All the raised leaves and everything. Very naturalistic, very charming.
Thank you for bringing in this interesting bottle to us today. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
The way I understood it was found in a dump.
It was found in a dump. How long have you had it?
About 15 years.
About 15 years. Okay. Well, of course, the brilliant cobalt color is really nice and pleasant, but the information that we really want to know about this piece is right on the bottom, and that tells us that it is Carter's, and of course Carter's is a very famous ink manufacturer, and this is a Carter's ink bottle. And this particular bottle, from the panel design on the side, is known as the cloverleaf bottle. And that's what these individual panels on the sides, which are six-sided or hexagon, and this is the cloverleaf bottle. Now, this is a very well-known bottle in bottle collecting, and we have a fairly good auction track record for this particular bottle. Do you have any idea about what it might be worth at this point?
No, I didn't have any idea.
Well, right now, at auction, this particular bottle is selling for about $135 to $150. Not bad for a nice little bottle. You like that?
Yes, I like that.
Great.
The blue on that Carter's ink bottle is so exquisite and so deep. Think I could have a scarf made of it?
Dress, a pair of shoes, whatever you like.
Oh, wow, goody.
What I found interesting, Helene, was that these bottles were not made to be saved. They were made to be used and thrown away. And yet today, we treasure them for their color and for what they are. And also, the Roseville pieces weren't meant to be special either. They were meant to be, to hold flowers, to be used around the house, to be decorative things. They weren't terribly expensive, but today they have become expensive, and we do treasure them.
The crazing on the Donatello bowl. Now, is that a normal kind of crazing that we see?
I'm glad you brought that up. The crazing on that particular line of Roseville pottery is expected, and so collectors don't particularly become upset by the crazing on that line. But on 95 to even 99% of the items that you see crazing on, it is a defect and something that does decrease the value. But on a few things, you only find it crazed, or that is the normal way you find it, so collectors are not discombobulated by that.
Okay. They're looking at it as, well, it's just a normal sign of aging.
Sometimes this just happened.
Okay. It, really brings us right into almost our flashlight of the week. Just because something's old doesn't mean it's valuable. And I think in terms of World War II ration books, those little 3x5 paper-covered books, if they're intact, maybe they're worth $10 each. Otherwise, if they're in poor condition, ripped or torn, no value. Historically important, but not a lot of money there.
People come up to me all the time and they say, oh, this is 100 years old. And they expect me to be impressed. But in many cases, I'm thinking, so what?
Oh, Joe, you don't.
Of course I do. Because many times what they're showing me is some little piece of flotsam or jetsam that has no interest whatsoever. It's damaged and has very little value. And it's difficult to tell them that. Well, thank you very much for joining us in our attic this week. And I hope next week we can join you once again to look for treasures in your attic.
For comments and suggestions, write to the address shown on the screen or visit the Treasures in Your Attic website. Don't Trash Your Treasures, a companion book to this series by hosts Joe Rawson and Helene Vendelman, is available for purchase. To obtain your copy of Don't Trash Your Treasures, call 1-800-829-7562.